Hello everyone, this is Marcel. Welcome to my channel. Today I would like to cover the topic of leaving a legacy. Most people want to be remembered. They want to make a difference in the world, see their lineage carried on, their last name or all their lessons handed down. When they finally pass away, leave the world with a sense of pride, knowing that others will remember them. Kind of a touching thought, isn't it, when it's phrased that way? So what comes to mind when one considers leaving a legacy? Perhaps in the genetics that's passed down to their kids, right? I think that's covered a lot, in fact, in MGTOW, so we'll touch base on it. Then the second thing a person may consider is the lessons they hand down or share with others, in a sense helping people so that they'll remember in return. Then finally, there's the idea of making a significant change, something, either a discovery or an alteration to society that has such an impact that it resounds through the ages. Let's go over some of these ideas and see how they might apply to today's society, how they could be accomplished in different ways. Well, firstly, in regards to genetics, passing on lineage through kids is very important to some people, so I am going to cover it. As you know, when any person has a child, then half of that child is genetically similar to the parent. The other half is from the other parent. So for every offspring, from the individual's perspective, their fitness is 0.5. If someone has 2 kids, then the fitness is 1. All of the genes, in theory, have been passed down with respect to some random variation. This accounts for any of the genetics within a family's line. So cousins, brothers, sisters, they all play a role in the genetic fitness of the individual, in that they contribute by carrying genetic similarities. In the animal kingdom, that is extremely important because, an animal's capabilities within the environment, its behaviors, its traits, are almost all directly influenced by its genetics. It's not likely to be nurtured or attained outwardly. And even if it is nurtured, arguably, then those behaviors from its parent that were brought down and passed on, that behavior within itself was genetically derived. And that's true up until a point when you get into higher organisms, primates, dolphins, for example, where learning becomes a much more important behavior in of itself. Once an organism reaches the threshold where it chooses not to behave in with its genetic programming, it becomes a game changer. Now that conversation can be a rabbit hole I can dive way into because I'm doing some genetics research right now, so I don't want to get started on that. The most important trait that humans have as opposed to almost any other creature is their ability to learn. I'm happy to go into that in another video, but for today's topic, let's just ask the question, in modern society, namely in Western countries, how important is genetics? Does it really even matter? I suppose in cases where you have a monarchy, kings and queens, genetics does play a role there to a degree. But does it have anything to do with whether or not they're a good ruler? Probably not. A good leader is defined almost entirely by how he treats his people. Maybe let's say genetics in regards to phenotype, an outward appearance. Perhaps that makes a difference. Somebody absolutely wants kids that look similar to themselves. Maybe the offspring are more prone or immune to certain diseases. The direction society's going when it comes to race and outward appearance, it would seem that genetics are becoming less important by the day, at least to most. I don't think that they're going to play much of a part in how successful a person would be in their lifetime, and are not representative of the success of the person's parents. Well, maybe it's not the genes themselves that matter. Perhaps it's the rearing of the kids, the lessons that are taught to them, everything they learn while growing up. Well, how much of a role does the male actually get to play in that process nowadays? Let's set aside the whole concept of, guys getting divorced out and losing rights to their kids and all that. Let's focus on if there were a good family, a healthy family unit with no issues, everything was fine. How much of a role does he actually play? You've got babysitters involved, you got schools involved, state mandated training of the kids from the time they're about 5 years old. In previous times, even just a couple hundred years ago, a parent could put a huge influence on their child as far as what kind of person they would end up being. But nowadays, it's kind of muted. Between the state, the schools, social media, for crying out loud, kids are raised by everyone other than their parents. Let alone the fact that they're practically born nowadays with a sense of entitlement. You got parents getting charged for doing things like putting their kids in the corner to try and discipline them. Even the best, most well-meaning parents' hands are completely tied. It makes it almost impossible to raise the kids the way the parents want, even in cases where they're going to be home teaching them, basically raising them under a rock. It's not setting them up with the tools that they need to interact with society properly, and in the end, possibly setting them up for failure anyway. Not much changes even in cases of adoption or surrogacy. The system as it is set up these days is not designed to help people build strong families. Broken families are far easier to control. Feel free to disagree. Perhaps that's a conversation for another day as well. Moving on, when it comes to last names, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of emphasis put on them anymore. Maybe in some rare cases. My father changed his last name as kind of a grudge against his father. So it can all be destroyed in an instant. I don't think that those are carried on. And, if a guy is fortunate enough to have nothing but girls, then, there's not much hope for him. Nothing against someone who wants to build a family or raise children, but it's not going to be an easy road. If anyone has any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Let's say maybe someone doesn't identify their legacy through their offspring, that it's more the passing of ideas like a mentor. Not to share a sad story here, but when I was younger, I met a man who was dying of cancer, actually, and he gave me some of the best advice that I've ever heard. I wasn't able to speak to him for very long, but I will say that I remember him to this day, and likely will for the rest of my life. Without getting into a long story, I was being teased by people at school. It was becoming really bad, and the suggestions that he gave me allowed me to change the scenario around to where I was on top again. Gave me back control of my social interactions where I could define how people should treat me. In a very short amount of time, he passed on a part of himself to me that will go on forever. Thing is, someone certainly does not need to be related in order to do that. It really just comes down to the value a person puts in what they're doing, how carefully they craft their advice. I imagine at that point in his life, he was being very specific about everything he wanted to say, all that he was choosing to do. My takeaway from it was that we embody the importance of our actions. We put that value and quality there, and that's what allows them to carry on our message. Then you have the final way that a person makes an impact, a legacy, and that is through making a difference in the world. More specifically, making a change in the world. I sit back and look at society as a whole, the technology, the advances that we've made, even just in the last few hundred years. It's almost unbelievable just to look at a pickup truck or a computer and think that at some point someone had to build the foundation for that and originally did it from scratch. It might almost seem impossible to be able to recreate that kind of innovative nature, come up with something genuinely new, but everything that's ever been made has been made based upon knowledge that was previously attained. It all started somewhere, true, but it didn't start with something big. It started with something small, and everyone added to it until it became something monumental. Huge changes these days are possible. The only thing standing in most people's way is distractions, society. People in older times had difficulty. Sure, survival was a much bigger thing than it is now. Though the difference is, creativity wasn't suppressed. It wasn't discouraged like it is nowadays. See, the biggest hurdle is not the capabilities now. We have more resources that have ever existed in history. Now it comes down to determination, the willingness to take that idea and push through, and not let anyone or anything stop someone from accomplishing it, from making it become a reality, all the while not letting anyone steal it or corrupt it. That goes for any ideas, not just something that a person would manufacture. As a summary of all of this subject, we should take ownership of our own legacy, not leave it on the shoulders of anyone else, whether it be our children or our families. Craft it and create it ourselves. Put value and quality into everything that we do so that to a point it would even be worth carrying on. You never know when something that you've done could be passed on for eternity. Then finally, even the smallest accomplishments can be pushed forward and built upon to make the greatest changes in history. Who knows where we would be today if someone ages ago had not put the effort into even a small discovery, not realizing the difference it would make through time. We don't have to re-split the atom or build an automobile from scratch. Even the smallest discovery can change everything. And that, gentlemen, is how I believe that a legacy is built. Let me know down below what you think. Did I miss anything? If you want to hear more content like mine, like, subscribe, share, and until next time, this has been Marcel.